another time. Now, the Vice President of Nigeria, Senator Kashim Shettima, sought partnership and support of the banking community for the 1 million digital jobs initiative by the Tinubu administration for young Nigerians. Senator Shettima made the demand when he received a delegation from the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria on a courtesy visit to the presidential villa. Addressing the delegation led by its president and chairman of council, Dr. Ken Opara, the vice president, who spoke about the intentions of the Tinubu administration across different sectors, said beyond the fuel subsidy removal, the harmonization of the foreign exchange, beyond the tax and fiscal reform committee, President Bola Tinubu is the most business-friendly president in contemporary history of Nigeria. Now, joining us to discuss the technology.
The banking sector, which was also emphasized today during the VP's comment, represents the engine of growth. That's very, very important. They serve as catalysts for economic growth. What you saw with the growth in terms of the GDP contribution is what happened during the period of when we had, of course, the last session and the quarter where there was slowdown in economic activity. But what we are seeing now is that banks are also deepening access to financial support, especially to the key sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, small businesses, and infrastructure. And of course, that sensitization is very important. So we are going to see growth of the financial system as we move on, especially before the end of this financial year.
Now, joining us to discuss the technology innovation policy priorities for the new administration is Niyi Yusuf, managing partner at Veraki Africa. He's also the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Welcome to the show, Mr. Yusuf. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Good. We have quite a bit to get through. Firstly, I have to say, a very detailed and robust report we have from Veraki. I find particularly the Bloomberg Innovation Index quite interesting. South Korea, Singapore, Switzerland are the top countries leveraging technology for economic prosperity and productivity. What are they doing right? What did they put in place to make this a successful venture?
Right, thanks. And I think that's a good question to ask, because when you know what others have done to be successful, then that can help you in shaping what you also need to do. So for those top three countries, I think first thing is they have a plan. So there's a documented plan, a strategy, typically 5 years, apart from Switzerland that has a 4-year plan. The other two, it's a 5-year plan of science, technology, and innovation, STI, and how that will impact the various communities and the kind of resources that are required. So that's one. The second thing, it's around having a governance architecture. How do we go about taking decisions that affect science, tech, and innovation? And the governance architecture is such that it cuts across different ministries. So there's a council into which there are different representatives, so that whatever decisions you take can cut across different agencies of government. The third is resources, capital. So if you look at South Korea, I think spent about 5% of GDP on R&D. And as a common figure that I thought was quite interesting, $25 billion. So in 2021, South Korea spent $25 billion on R&D. In 2020, Singapore spent about $25 billion again in R&D. So those are the things that I think cut across those three
Sounds like countries. Very deliberate processes they've taken and steps and measures to get there. And of course, we can see it's working. But that brings us back here. Let's come back home. What should the immediate priorities for the federal and state governments be in terms of addressing a fledgling digital economy?
Right. So in our report, we listed 10 things. But if we talk about immediate priorities, I think the Federal Ministry of Communication and Digital Innovation just released 5 sets of priorities and sort of aligned with our 10 priorities. So really the first is around education. So either you call it STEM or you call it STEAM. So science, tech, engineering, earth, and mathematics. So education is important. And it's interesting that the VP was just talking to bankers to support creating digital jobs. So we must invest in skills, we must invest in education. Second is infrastructure. We must invest in providing the right infrastructure. So Lagos is North Nigeria, and we have decent internet infrastructure in Lagos, but we don't have that much in my village. And so we need to ensure this infrastructure is spread across. Third is the cost to access the infrastructure. Nigeria is, I think, is ranked 114 in terms of internet affordability. So it's expensive compared to the minimum wage that people earn. So we need to find ways to reduce the cost. And I would say maybe the last one is the right governance architecture, the right policies that will get states and federal together. Right-of-ways. We've been trying to reduce the cost of right-of-ways. Only 7 states have reduced the cost. Other states are still asking for thousands of naira for right-of-ways. So there must be a consolidated coordination in terms of governance that ensure that we all speak with one voice, whether you are federal, state, or local government.
So like a real harmonization, and that will make things a lot more seamless. Right. Well, I mean, we all know that Nigeria has a very high rate of financial exclusion. What steps do we need to take in approaching digital exclusion to make sure we do not have a repeat situation?
Right. Like they say, history repeats itself. And I think we're all actually getting to some form of digital exclusion today. The urban centers are different from the rural areas. Right? I mean, so if you look at 2G coverage, 2G coverage, second generation of GSM coverage, it's in most places in Nigeria, like more than 80%. 3G is less than 60%. 5G is less than 1%. I mean, arguably that is new. And so the first thing is really around providing infrastructure, digital infrastructure to cut across the length and breadth of Nigeria. Second thing would be improving digital literacy. We need people to know how to use technology, to know the benefits of technology. Adult literacy, math, English is about 66% in Nigeria, right? That is 96% in China, a 1.2 billion population. Not to talk of digital literacy. So we need to improve on digital literacy. So infrastructure literacy. Second would be access to market, access to data. Government is probably the biggest buyer of technology when it's not proven. So we need Nigerian government to stop using, Yahoo.email address or Gmail and start using local technology products. And that way, those solutions can then be made easily available to the rest of us.
Right, you know, talking about infrastructure, which really is the bane of every business existence here in Nigeria, let's look at that on a national scale in relation to cyber attacks.
Right.
What measures are in place to protect that?
Right, so I think it's an interesting question, and sometimes you benefit from being a slow adopter, right? So Nigeria doesn't have a lot of digital infrastructure, so which means there's still a lot of manual offline activity. So in terms of exposure to attacks, only those that are digital can be exposed to cybersecurity. So that's good in some sense, but it's also poor because everything needs to be digital and connected. And so the first thing is we need to design our infrastructure with resilience in mind. Design them from the get-go such that they can be able to withstand attacks, either internal attacks or external attacks. And once you want to do that design should be done based on some global standards. So in the banking industry in Nigeria, for instance, they've standardized on ISO 27001 series, that's International Standard Organization, 27001, 27002, 27032, and so on for security. So that is fine. And so the banking industry is working towards having a SOC, what they call a security operations system, a center for the industry. We need to have similar for oil and gas. We need to have similar for manufacturing. And we need to have a coordinated central center for the entire nation where all of the sectoral centers can log into, can feed into. And that way you build resilience. That way you also monitor what is happening. So design with resilience in mind, have sectoral linkages, have a coordinated way of monitoring, and of course do regular testing. At some point putting in place security mechanisms, and then you don't test to be sure they're working, they're effective, they're fit for purpose. You know, people talk about doing dress rehearsals or testing like once in a month, etc. So we need to have such testing being done, and that way we'll be able to plug whatever loopholes that may exist.
Right, you know, it sounds like quite a number of things to do, and many would probably say, why have these steps not been taken so far? But basically, what hinders this process? What are the impediments to getting there currently?
Right, so some of these steps have been taken in different sectors. So I know the Office of the National Security Advisor has a SOC they've been working on. The banking industry has one. And so I think the challenge is really around leadership and vision to ensure that we don't do things in isolation, but you do things at scale for the entire country. And then that goes back to what a Singapore, Switzerland, or South Korea is doing well. They have a plan, 4-5-year plan that everybody aligns with and everybody works for. And so we need to have that cybersecurity plan for the country that tells us what each and every subnational needs to do, what each and every MDA needs to do, and how the private sector can also key in. So once that plan is provided, from a policy point of view, from a governance point of view, then all of us can key in, and you know how your own actions will affect others. You know the resources that are available. And so planning is important, but make it multi-stakeholder based, and of course, let it reflect different inputs.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, still on the terrain, let's look at the topic of business incorporation, which I find a very interesting one. If we look at the fintechs, for instance, I mean, of course, I have to touch on them a little bit. Many of these companies are getting incorporated overseas. Firstly, I want to ask you, what's responsible for that, and how do we begin to improve the attractiveness of Nigeria for business incorporation?
Yeah. So for most of the fintechs, and I think the first thing to understand that fintechs are startups enabled by technology, but they are fast growing. So speed is of essence to them. And most of the startups will typically start up in Nigeria. And then you realize that they need capital. And they need the capital in USD, not necessarily in Naira, because they're buying products, they're serving a global audience, they need to expand beyond the country. Now, where will the capital come from? And what will the owners of the capital be requesting? And when you want to answer that question, you then begin to understand that, okay, maybe Nigeria may not be the answer, at least for now. And that's where a number of them will incorporate in Delaware in US. Delaware offers tax advantages. Incorporation, opening of bank accounts, you do from your laptop, from your home, without having to leave the country. Now, that's where we need to get to, where I can incorporate a company, I can open bank accounts from my laptop without having to go see a lawyer or go to Abuja. So they're able to do that easily. But beyond that, are the kind of tax regime that Delaware offers in terms of fair tax, but more importantly, low tax, when you want to make your exit, when you want to gain your income. And so we need to create such schemes that makes it easy for international capital to come in, that makes the capital also for them to repatriate the capital if and when they want to, and at low cost. So the tax regime must be fair. And there are a few schemes that are coming on now. So Niyi and the Future of Crowd team are setting up something in Ekpe called Eternal City. That will be a purposely developed center that have governance based on technology. I think they've been licensed now to be like a special processing zone, just dedicated to tech. And hopefully that can make it a bit easier for startups to incorporate there, work from there, and serve a global audience.
Okay, so again, it all goes back to ease of doing business,
Correct.
and that's the rudiment of the issue. But you see, this conversation is not going to be as robust enough if we don't talk about data protection and privacy, because that's been quite an issue. We're in the age of harvesting. How do we begin to boost the confidence of customers when it comes to interacting with the tech space, when it comes to their privacy?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. Every time you are on the internet or use technology, you leave a trace. I mean, your cell phone leaves traces, because each time you put on your cell phone, somebody knows that you are in Koyi or you're in Abuja or you're in VI. And when you go on any of these tech platforms, you leave traces. So that is true. Nigeria has started well. We have the NDPR, that's the National Data Protection Act, that was signed into law, I think, last year. The NDPR is close to the GDPR in the European Union, which is seen as a gold standard for data protection. And NDPR basically says data belongs to you, the person. You must give your consent, formal consent, to whoever wants to use your data. The person who wants to use your data, either the data controller or the data processor, must not only get a consent, but must only ask for relevant data. So if all you need is just my name, don't ask for my date of birth. Don't ask for my residence. So only ask for relevant data and allow me to be able to say, use the data or stop using my data. So that act has been put in place. A commission has been established to focus on implementing the Act, and they've started the process of implementation. So now is to see how well that is done. Engagement with not only the data controllers, but also with the citizens, so that citizens know their rights. And when citizens know their rights, they're in a position to then, I talk about digital literacy, they're in a position to then ask for their rights. And so that is going away. I think the second thing we've done well in the country is a Federal Consumer and Competition Protection, Consumer and Competition Commission, and that's out to protect consumers. Now, they've been doing that for credit, loan applications and co. But I think they also now also begin to collaborate with the data protection and start to also work on how to help consumers understand their rights as far as data policy and data privacy is concerned.
All right, as we wrap up, I mean, there's so much to go through, but in your capacity as the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, let's get your outlook on the economy from a business perspective. What are the quick wins here, in your opinion?
Right. There are quick wins. I think, the economy has gone through, the World Bank, was it yesterday or Wednesday, released a report for Sub-Saharan Africa, and they talk about a lost decade, right? So, the last 10 years has been very difficult. So it's going to be painful in the short term to ride the cost. So whether it's subsidy removal, is FS amortization, those are painful things, and we need to be able to take those painful decisions now. Because decisions we did not take 10 years ago are the pains we are going through today. And so my view is that in the short term, it's going to be tough. But if we take the right decisions now, then there will be a bountiful harvest in the medium term and the long term for the country. So quick wins, watch your costs. Inflation is high, consumers have low purchasing power, so companies must watch their costs closely to ensure that you are not producing above a certain cost pressure. Second is focus on what your consumers really, really, really want. Now is not the time to do everything. Now is the time to focus on a few products, a few SKUs that are selling well, and push that to the market. And if you understand what the consumer needs, and we've seen a lot of that today, there's a sachet economy because consumers who have the power, so they're buying small, and producers are now doing small sachets. So understand what your consumer needs.
So on the whole, it's a positive outlook, but approach with caution and responsibility.
Absolutely.
I'll take all the responsibility. Mr. Yusuf, thank you so much for being on the show this morning.